Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Outside Fence podcast. I'm your host Tristan Heffernan and with me is Stewart Bowles Brown. Bowles, I didn't think we'd get to episode 2. We almost didn't. I've got a kid waking up in the background. Thanks for joining me again despite no check in the mail. How did you fare on the weekend there at Caulfield?
It was a small loss for myself. Started well, but unfortunately gave a bit back and some. So went away with a small loss.
Not to be helped. Thanks to everyone who supported the show in episode 1. The likes and the subscribes are really good to help us get a bit of a kick along and keep us motivated to keep the show going. So if you do like the show, make sure you give us a like or subscribe here on YouTube. Give us a bit of love on Twitter. Everything's much appreciated. But Bowles, we're going to have a look at 3 races today at Caulfield. First of all important, the track. Plenty of talk about Caulfield this week in terms of pattern and bias. What did you think of the track?
Well, there certainly was a bias evident there. First off, the rail was out 12 metres, so as soon as I saw that, and there was relatively fine weather in the lead-up, even though we did have a soft 6, I was wary that it was going to play on pace. I actually thought maybe the fence would chop out a little bit more than it did through the day, but it was definitely an on-pace day. Either leader or outside the leader won 5 of the 9 races on the day, and pretty much you had to be in the first 3 or 4 to be a winning chance. After race 1, my suspicions, I suppose, were heightened a little bit, although I was a little bit wary as I thought it was a fairly low-grade 2-year-old race, but certainly after race 2, I was very confident that it was an on-pace day, considering they went fairly fast in it, and nothing really made ground other than sort of horses along the inside, and even 100-1 Pop Lord Durante managed to sort of sneak up the inside and not finish too far from the leaders, so that was sort of a bit of a giveaway that that was going to be the pattern for the day.
Okay, well, we'll keep that in mind. First of all, we're going to watch race 8, which was arguably the most important race on the card, mainly because of the short price favourite Harbour Views. There's been a lot of chatter about him heading towards a Cox Plate. We might start with your thoughts on Harbour Views as we go to the replay balls.
As far as Cox Plate goes, I thought it was fairly ambitious talk, but I was quite confident about the horse going into Saturday's race, even allowing for the possible track bias that might be in play. As you can see, he did draw wide, but I thought, given the lack of speed on paper, that he may end up outside the leader or even 1 out, 1 back. I thought he'd been the first 4 at worst. As you can see, John Allen was caught wide early, but elected to ease right back and settle there in 6th position on the outside. The leader at the moment is Sir Coney, and he's only going along at quite a slow tempo. I imagined him coming up from 1,600, 2,000 metres, and he'd been a fairly fast horse at stages through his career, that they would go along at least an even speed, which obviously didn't eventuate in the end. You'll see the eventual winner is Miramar, which is currently 1 out, 1 back in the yellow cap there, given a piece of a ride by Lewis German. But back on Harbour Views, as you can see, as they come down the side here, the race starts to hot up a fair bit, and they will get into the straight soon. And he looms as a likely winner. However, given the slow tempo, he's had to work into the race from the 600, and he's in fact run the fastest split between the 600 and 400 of the meeting. And so, as you can see, he's worked into the race there, and he's in a striking position as Miramar's sort of gone for home. As you can see, most of the on-pace horses are still well intact there, given the slow tempo. And as Harbour Views comes to the outside here, he looms as a possible winner, but this is where he starts to fade on his run, and it becomes a war between Miramar and Sir Coney. Harbour Views, in the end, has finished 4th and has been quite soft on its run at the end there. Now, subsequent to the race, the horse has pulled up lane, which could be an excuse for its supposed poor performance and its sort of lack of finish. The start prior was its first go up 2,000 metres, and I thought that might be a query for the horse. However, that was a fast run race, and it sat close to the speed and was strong through the line, so I thought that wouldn't be an issue on Saturday. So I suppose that what you can take out of it, either you can say the apparent lameness may have been the issue for the apparent poor performance, or there's maybe some chance it could have been gassed by that spurt between the 600 and 400, and the fact it would have had to make a long 600-metre sprint to a line might have hindered its finishing position in the end.
Okay, you mentioned a great ride from Lewis German. What about the ride made it so good?
So the horse he was on, Miramar, is better known for its performances over, say, 2,400 metres or distances around that range. And so I suppose in a 400 or 200 metre sprint home, he's not going to beat a horse like Harbour Views, because Harbour Views is a much more brilliant horse. However, Lewis German obviously knew they were going at such a slow speed to the 600, and just before the 600, he's elected to take off and really set the race alight, knowing that he's got a horse that can stay, and sort of a 600 metre sprint would sort of draw the stamina out of a lot of horses that maybe are suspect at 2,000 metres. And that turned out to be the winning move in the race. As the leader, Sir Coney, he's a horse who's better known for performances over shorter distances. He was having his first run at 2,000 metres. And then running the splits they did, it can be hard for the horses from further back in the field, and also given the pattern on the day, to actually get into the race.
Okay, cool. We're just watching the replay again. There's a couple of horses back in the field that caught the eye here too. One was Credence, and one was an import called South Pacific. Do you want to just highlight which ones these are and maybe talk through their performance?
Yep, so Credence is third last on the fence there in orange colours, and South Pacific's just ahead of it in sort of black colours. So I'll talk about Credence first. He's absolutely flying this prep. He was a last start winner at Flemington, and I was a little bit surprised to see him so far back in this race, and given how the day was playing and also the tempo of the race, he pretty much had no chance from where he was. As you can see, he found a little bit of traffic there as well. But he's got home and in fact run the fifth best last 600, second best last 400 and third best last 200 of the meeting, according to punting form. So I'd give that run a big tick and say he's still flying, and he's a horse that can win either next start or even the start after, and he's shown also he's capable even at further distances. So he's definitely a horse I'd be happy to follow wherever he goes. You can see how wide he gets out on the track there, pretty much a spot where no one wanted to be on the day, and he still got home well. The other horse that I mentioned was South Pacific in the black colours there. He was an import having its first run for the Mar Eustace stable. Now, he had a bit of a rap on him, as he had form in Europe around a horse such as Constantinople, who ran so well in a Caulfield Cup last spring. I'd be surprised if he was suited at all by the very slow tempo. And you would have seen sort of around the 600 when the race really picked up, is when he sort of started to struggle a little bit, or appear to struggle. But once he sort of, I suppose, got used to the rise in tempo and balanced himself up, he's actually run the third fastest last 400 of the race and the second fastest last 200 of the race. So he's a horse that you can, I suppose, follow over further distances. Maybe have a look at him again next run, because I'm not sure how much benefit he'll derive from that run, given sort of the slow tempo and the sprint home nature. But he's definitely a horse just to keep in the back of your mind to see how he goes next start.
Yeah, beauty. You can definitely tell that flat spot he had. Those European races are run totally different to our sort of sit sprint races. So that's, if we can find him in a strongly run race, he might be one for us. It's a bit to take out of that race then, Balls. I guess you probably haven't changed your mind too much on Harbour Views. He's got to make a big step up if they're talking races like Cox Plates, but there's enough there to say that we can't sack him just yet for those bigger races.
No, I wouldn't be sacking him off that run. He's going to have a little break now anyway, and then come back to for the Fian Stakes in September. So that's sort of the next time we'll see him, and that's a weight for age race. So that's going to be obviously a different level for him. But he's always a horse that's probably going to be well found in the market because he's had a huge spruik on him ever since his first start at Warrnambool, where he's heavily backed and won impressively, and he's very much a hype horse. So you've always got to be careful following in those horses, especially one like him who sort of is starting to get up in the grades, so it's harder to win the races, but he still remains well in the market for a lot of races.
Okay, a few little technical gremlins getting involved there, Balls. Well, we're going to move on to race 7 now at Caulfield, which was won by a pretty promising-looking horse in Alfa Oro. Was it maybe a bit of surprise to lead? Maybe that's got something to do with the tempo. Anyway, I'll throw it to you, Balls. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I was a little bit shocked to see him lead. It wasn't sort of impossible to think that he could. However, I did have sort of Sam's Image and Lim's Lightning, two fairly fast horses, really contesting him for the lead. As you'll see, Sam's Image is the horse that jumped fastest there out wide. He was heavily backed. And he had a 3 kilo apprentice on him, which meant he carried little weight. So I assumed he would run along in front. However, they probably erred on him and probably rode him a bit too conservatively. As you see, he probably had the opportunity to cross the fence there. However, he hasn't. And Alfa Oro has crossed Lim's Lightning and found the front. And to be honest, as soon as Alfa Oro found the front like this, and he's only really gone at a slightly above average tempo, it was probably curtains for the rest of them because he's a pretty classy horse. And a lot of the horses chasing him behind have sort of reached their mark, whereas he is on an upward spiral to bigger and better things. As you can see, once they hit the straight here, he's raced away. He's had, obviously, the way the track's playing in his favour on the day, and they've only got that slightly above average tempo, so it was a bit of a fait accompli quite early that he would win. A horse like him, who's up and going and fit now, there's talk that he might contest a stakes race next. There's a Monash Stakes, I think it's in a couple of weeks, at Caulfield, over maybe 1,000 metres. Actually, it might be 1,100 metres, actually the same distance as Saturday's race. So that would be perfect for him. And it's a race that a horse like him, who is up and going and fit and on speed, he could run into a fair few horses that are kicking off a spring campaign, so we'll have that fitness advantage over them. And without seeing the field, it's a sort of race where, he could be hard to beat him.
Yeah, well, he was super impressive there. He hardly got out of second gear there at the end of that race. Sam's Image, that's such a weird ride to me. He was heavily backed. I assume because of his lightweight and his early speed and the way the track was racing, you really got to wonder what was going through the rider's mind there. Do you think that's a rider thing or a connection thing? Well,
going into the race, I wasn't keen on the horse at all, but I could understand why the money was coming for the horse. And this horse does have a history of being heavily backed as well. I remember, I think last start at Sandown, it was off the map as well on a similar sort of leader's track. So, I did expect it to lead. And that's sort of why the money came. And as you see, it had ample opportunity to get to the front. I'm not sure. I'd assume the connections would have insisted on leading, and maybe it's just a young rider riding on a Saturday who has decided to be a bit conservative. And I don't think it was in the horse's best interest. That happened, and it was pretty much game over for Sam's Image as soon as he didn't cross. The runner of the race, you could say, was Ruben Blur. Now, he's in the green colours, pretty much last in the dark green there. And so, as we've mentioned plenty of times, the way the track was playing on the day, and given the tempo of this race, he was in pretty much an impossible spot back there. He's come home and run the fastest last 600, 400 and 200 of the meeting from where he is, and he's made that run wide on the track. So that's an excellent run. And this is only at 1,100, where a lot of his best form is at 1,200 metres. And he was a winner at Caulfield over 1,200 metres to start prior. So if he gets up to 1,200 metres next start and even finds a similar race on a track where you can make ground, then he looks an easy horse to follow.
Yeah, he's really the obvious one there, isn't he? Is there a chance he gets over bet next time? Is that his usual pattern there, getting back? It would worry me to be falling into him next time if he's going to be back in the field again.
He can race closer.
Okay.
I can race. So it might have just been at the 1,100 and the tempo that sort of meant he was back there. But sort of 1,200 bit softer tempo early, he can race even in the first 4.
Okay. He's going to be hard to beat next time. Did you like anything else out of that replay?
Not massively, but I will make note of one horse. A horse I actually had a small bet on myself called Price Range, which is an import for the Mar Eustace stable. Now, it had a jump out prior to its first up run and jumped out quite impressively, I thought, and it was first up over 1,400 and went far too hard in that race and sort of over-raced and dropped out and sort of finished towards the tail. It had another jump out since. And jumped out well again. And then back to the 1,100 on Saturday looked more suitable. Obviously, you're sort of taking on trust a little bit that the jump out was its form and not the race start. And I think it performed well enough there to show that it's sort of back on track and it could pick up a race similar to this in time. You know, the Mar Eustace stable, they can get their horses sort of through long preps and keep them going. So it wouldn't shock me to see this horse sort of race for the next 2 or 3 months, and he's probably a horse that I can see winning a race on a Saturday or even dropping back to the midweeks. I'd be surprised if he couldn't win there.
Okay, nice. We're going to have one more replay here from Caulfield on Saturday. It was a pretty fair meeting, it would be fair to say, I think. So we might just massage your ego a bit, Balls, and pop up a horse that you've actually backed to win. And this will tie in with a new segment we've got later on. The rider here, Michael Rod, we'll show him a bit later on. No doubt the new segment will bring the house down. But let's have a look at race 3. This is a horse called Mystery Shot. Run us through this one.
Yeah, so as Hef mentioned, I was quite keen on this horse. It's in the yellow colours there with the blue sleeves, Spice of Thoroughbred colours, just pushing forward as it is. An important part of the race is coming up here. You can see it spearing through in the middle there, just making that horse on its outside, Scorpius, work a bit. Now, Scorpius was probably the main danger in the race. So Rod's a nice piece of jockey there. He's made Scorpius work a bit to get to that outside leader position, and he's come back and he's got the sit on it now. And to be honest, as a punter, this was a very easy watch. The horse came into the race having won 2 from 2 from the Lindsay Smith stable, but had done nothing special on the clock. But you could tell sort of from the eye it had been a couple of quite stylish wins, and there was definitely sort of more to come. And the thing I especially liked about it on Saturday was I mapped it to pretty much receive the run that it did and receive every possible chance. There was nothing sort of brilliant about his win, to be honest. There was more workmanlike than anything, but he might be that kind of horse that sort of just gets the job done.
Yeah, it's always risky to pot a horse when it wins, isn't it? Because you just don't know how much is left. The horses that finish behind, they're pretty much flat chat going. But, yeah, who knows how far this horse can go, because he can only win. So that horse running home for second, it caught the eye a bit there, Balls. Who was that?
That was Splendor on the Grass, and it was probably, along with Ruben Blur, one of the runs of the day, considering how the track played. Now, it drew the outside gate and was eased back to settle last in the field, which obviously wasn't really the play on Saturday, as mentioned probably 1,000 times before. But as you can actually see the start here, it's in the green with the black sleeves, and it's a bit slow out or deliberately snagged. And see, it's out the back there, and it's sort of hard pressed to win from there. But it's, as you can see, it's come wide and made its run, and ran the 7th best last 600 of the meeting and the 15th best last 200, which is a pretty good effort in a 1,440 metre race, considering there are other sort of decent class sprint races on the day. The horse was coming off 2 wins at Sandown at the midweek, so the horse is in form. But this was definitely its best performance so far, and definitely a horse that sort of can be followed. But as I would be wary with it, it's maybe the sort of horse that could be a bit overbet next start. And on its profile so far, the 1,440 metres is probably as far as it wants, even though it sort of got home well there. So if they stretch it out to a mile next start, I'd still be a tiny bit wary about it running a strong 1,600.
Okay, yeah, it's hard to get much value out of these flashing light runs when they back up next time. Is there something maybe a bit more obscure we can take out of this race, Balls?
Yeah, well, you see the horse on the outside, a Splendor on the Grass there, a horse called No Change. Now, it's only sort of a borderline Saturday horse, probably more a midweek horse. But it was racing there with Splendor on the Grass, and Splendor on the Grass sort of put pay to it a bit round the turn, got up inside it, and No Change looked to be going nowhere. But once they hit the straight and No Change was able to balance up, it's actually got home fairly well and run the equal best last 200 of the race with Splendor on the Grass. Now, once again, No Change has raced. The racing pattern wasn't suited on the day, so it's a horse that you could probably follow. Possibly back to the midweeks would be ideal. And the thing is, it was sort of 50 or 60 to 1, so it's coming off with a big SP next to its name, and that run sort of, I suppose it's a little bit hidden. Like it'll say it's run sort of 6th or 7th in the guide. There's sort of nothing super special about it. So it's sort of one that could get under the guards of a few next start. And as I said, if it drops back in class, stays around that 1400 metre range, then it could be a bet to have.
Okay, excellent. We've got a bit to follow out of this meeting. Anything else we can touch on with Victorian racing at the moment? We're getting towards the pointy end of the Jockeys Premiership. Can you give us a little pearl or something around that, Balls?
Yeah, well, as we're entering into July, it's obviously the last month of the season, and you'll hear a lot of talking on Sky Channel and Racing.com and places like that about the Jockeys Premiership and who's winning and what's the gap between the riders and things like that. So in Victoria, it's between Damien Oliver and Craig Williams at the moment. Williams has a 7-win lead after riding 2 winners on Saturday. Now, obviously, these two riders wouldn't be unaccustomed for them to be in this sort of situation come the end of the season, riding for the premiership and that kind of thing. One thing you will note in past years, Craig Williams, when he's been up there, he has an excellent record in July. Obviously, he's pushing hard for the premiership, so I'm sure he's doing plenty of form. He's trying to get on the right horses, and he's obviously giving them every chance because he's very focused. So it pays to sort of follow him, Craig Williams for sure, in the month of July. As his record there is outstanding, and he is coming off a lean patch sort of over the last month to 6 weeks. But as I said, with 2 winners on Saturday, that might just be about to turn for him, and he can be worth following at Metro meetings. It's probably not too many expert words saying to follow Craig Williams at a Metro meeting. But the incentive is really there, and the history is there that he performs big time when the premiership's on the line.
Well, he is a divisive figure on racing Twitter, Craig Williams, so we'll be watching on the next month with interest there. We've just got a little question. We put the call out on Twitter yesterday, and we've got a question in from a Source G who's asked, is second up syndrome a real thing? And if so, will your show suffer from it? So a little crispy one there from Source. I might start off with this one, Balls. I'm not a huge believer in second up syndrome. This is something we sort of used to hear when we were growing up out in the old betting rings, and one of those old cliches in racing. I'll watch out for the second up syndrome. But one thing I do take note of is when a stayer will run a big race first up and then they can have a down run second up. I was told once by a prominent trainer that stayers... they are the ones that can go right off the boil after that fresh run and then just wait for them to get to their proper distance range. So that's the type of horse where we can be a bit wary of a second up run. Bit unlike our show, that usually comes off a bit of a gut buster or a really good effort first up, which we're not really falling into that bracket just so yet. We can also use that theory though with these stayers. You can find one at longer odds, I found, getting up to their right distance. If you just think back to their first up run, often they'll get to the 2000 or the 2100 or whatever, and they'll have maybe a bit flatter runs at 1400, 1600 metres, which will push them out in the market a bit. But if they have run that really good race first up, keep that in mind that they've come back really well, and they might just be waiting to get to their right distance. That's something I've had a little bit of success with in the past. Balls, what do you think about the second up syndrome?
Yeah, it's not. I'm sort of not scared off by it or anything like that. Sort of think it's a thing. I'm certainly aware of obviously of what you're saying. That I'm more I suppose, looking for patterns in horses' form more than anything else. So obviously their performances second up are important to me, but also when they're second up, having a look how they've gone first up and then comparing that to past preparations as well, because you might see a link there between, say, they can run poorly first up and run well second up, or they might overdo it and, like as you mentioned, run sort of a bit of a gut buster first up, or run really well first up, but that then leads to a down performance second up. So I think as all things with horse form, looking at the patterns of each horse and I suppose how they react to different stages of their preparation, I think that's important, particularly when it comes to a horse having its second up run.
All right, thank you, Source, for your smart-ass question, I should say. But there's a bit to take out of that. We're going to move in now to my favourite segment of the week, takeaway of the week. I don't have any food to put on offer again, to the sure displeasure of a couple of viewers, but Balls, what can you give us this week to take away and learn from?
Yep, so obviously we had the meeting this week at Caulfield, and there was a lot of talk about how the track played, as there always is when we get to Caulfield. One thing that I'll mention when I'm doing the form for a meeting at Caulfield, I'll always have a rule pretty much that it's on pace until I see otherwise. So if I'm betting early into a meeting before a race has happened, I'll only back a horse and I'm keen on that I know will be on pace, because I don't really want to back one that's going to sell out the back and then they run a few races and you can't make ground and you're left with a ticket and you're probably going to be on at decent unders anyway. The only little factor I will say that is important as far as if it's on pace or not is the wind is a big thing at Caulfield. So it seems to be a fairly open area, Caulfield Racecourse, and it is significantly affected by wind. But the most common wind there, and probably the most important one to look out for, is a northerly wind. So that will be a headwind down the side of the track. So that includes the 1,000 metre, 1,100 and 1,200 metre starts, and that can lead to sort of tricky racing, as horses generally will benefit from getting cover, which generally can mean if too many horses want cover, obviously, then the pace will come right out of races and they can be really messy affairs, slowly run. It can throw up sort of some fluky results and that. So for me personally, if I'm doing the form for a Caulfield meeting and I see there's going to be a strong northerly wind, I generally start praying or sort of probably go into a negative frame of mind, to be honest, because it's hard to think what the jockeys are going to do, really.
Yeah, the negative frame of mind is one way of putting it, Balls off.
I will add, if some people do want to go and have a look at how a meeting plays with a northerly wind, there was a Caulfield meeting recently on the 30th of May, particularly the first half of the program. There was a strong northerly wind, and you'll see that horses sort of coming down the outside and with cover in the run were far better suited than those up on speed and setting the tempo. So, yeah, the 30th of May is one you can look back on if you want a good example of that.
Yeah, great. Wind is really one of the things that still doesn't quite seem tapped in the market these days. Everyone's sort of sectionals and track bias. People are starting to get a good handle on that, but I know wind just scares a lot of people away, you and me included.
It's the number one worst factor, outside factor in racing when you're doing the form, wind, because it purely will come down to now how is this jockey thinking, which can be hard work.
That's dangerous territory to get into. Thank you, Balls. My takeaway this week, we had racing down here on the Tapeta surface. I couldn't go to the show without mentioning that. The track raced an absolute treat, but the markets on Betfair were really bouncing around. So my takeaway was, this is more so for those of you who price up your own markets, which I always recommend, even if it's just to give you a proper feel for what a 100% market looks like these days, that we're seeing 130, 140%, and it's good to have that 100% mark just to see whether those $7, $9 horses, they're really value or not, because you'd be very surprised how long you have to get some horses to get a 100% market. But the takeaway I took from yesterday was you don't have to back or lay a horse just because they're considerably different to your market. So you got your prices there. You might think, I've marked this $8 and there it is at $10. What am I doing if I don't back this? I think you've just got to treat your markets as a guide, and I think you still want to make sure you're comfortable with the bets you're placing and not feel sort of pressured into it by your own markets. There was one instance yesterday where we had a $2.50 favourite, and I was sort of thinking, well, I had it priced longer than that, and thinking, well, this is probably more of a risk than anything. I was looking to lay, and a minute later we're looking at $6 on Betfair, and a horse I'm looking to lay. All of a sudden I'm thinking, oh geez, I've got to back $6. If this was $6, I'd have to be backing it. But I've sort of, I've already talked myself in the reasons why I'm sort of against it, and now I'm sort of looking at whether I should be backing it. So if you feel pressured, don't feel like you have to take a price. You can leave a race alone. You can leave a horse alone. I think you want to use your markets as a guide, and just stay with making comfortable bets, and don't be a slave to your prices. The only thing worse than not betting is making a bet you regret. So that's my takeaway, and not so much for you balls with the Metro racing on a Saturday at Caulfield, but some of those markets at Devonport yesterday, we're talking $4 out to 13, and will do your head in. So stay strong. That would be my advice.
Seems like sage advice.
It's an exhausting day sometimes looking at the fair. We're going to have one more segment now, balls. This is a new one before we sign off for the show. Remember when?
Are you channeling your inner Graham McNeese here? Or?
Yeah, I was going to use that one on you actually, balls. But yeah, some of the old diehards on Sky, they had some great Remember When shows. Each week, to throw to the end of the show, we're gonna put up a classic old race to stir up some racing memories. While we deep dive into the punt sometimes, I think we can all agree that the thing that gets us into the punt in the first place is some of these great races and the memories we have on where we were and who we backed and that sort of thing. So, each week we're going to throw up a race, and it might bring up some memories for you as well. But today's race, I've picked out the first one here. We're going to go back to 2008. This is one of my personal favourite horses. Balls, actually, you and I took a trip over to the Caulfield Cup this year, and we saw this horse run unplaced behind All the Good, I think it was, Godolphin horse. So that was just another run in this preparation where I lost my money on this horse. And it looked like it was his spring for the taking 2008, but it was turning into a total disappointment. But we had one more race on the preparation, the Cox Plate, and this particular horse had been sent over a few logs, which is something that I love, just to sharpen them back up. So I gave him one more last chance. I had to play suburban cricket in New Norfolk this day, which is tricky at the best of times, and I actually missed the race because I was trying to get the team home against an ageing quick called Snowy who hit me in the nuts and smashed my stump. So we lost anyway. It was a shocking day. But I came off in here, the mighty Maldivian had led all the way in the Cox Plate, and yeah, that really got me back out on all the money I'd lost for him on the spring, and made my year because he was one of my favourites, Maldivian. What did you do on this day in particular? Did you ever bet balls in this race? I'm sure you did.
I did actually add something on Maldivian. I'm sure my bet wasn't as big as yours, but still was a winner for me. I was actually out at Elwick Racecourse. They had a meeting on out there. I was smart enough to already retire from cricket, so I didn't miss things like the Cox Plate. Maybe having no ability also weighed into that. But yeah, I was out at Elwick with a few mates, and I do also remember it was my brother's birthday as well. So yeah. Those weird things that stick in your mind.
Oh, absolutely. So thanks again for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to see us stick around for another week. And hang around for an extra 2 minutes as we watch a dominant all-the-way display by Michael Rodd and the mighty Maldivian. Thanks, Bowles. See you next week.
Thanks, F.
Racing. Samantha Mess jumped away, one of the first out. Maldivian, Zarita both got away well. There's Thesio fired out of the barrier stalls. And also Rahi, but Thesio crossed down with Maldivian on his inside. They lead down to the judge. 2 lengths Rahi, 2 lengths away then Samantha Miss. She settles fourth outside Zarita. A length and a half, Gallant Tess, and then Sailor Gear. Back behind him, the stablemate is zipping 2 lengths away. 1 to Alamosa, 1 Sermiona, 1 Princess Cape, and Master O'Reilly is last of all. It's Maldivian the leader, 3/4. Thesio fired right up as they run up the side, and they've gone out 3 to 4 lengths. Rahib the Boulder is holding third. Samantha Miss is fourth. Zarita fifth on the inside, then Gallant Tess. Sailor Gear a little bit worse in midfield, down on the inside, followed by Zipping Alamosa and then Sermione. He's being followed Princess Cape second last on the fence, and Master O'Reilly brings up the rear. 1100 to go. They're not going all that hard. Maldivian by a length and a half. Thesio settled a bit better. 2 lengths to Rahib, 2 lengths away Samantha Miss. 1.5 further back at the 1,000 came Zarita, and then Gallant Tess. 1 Sailor Gear, 1 to Zipping Alamosa the rail, 1 Sermione, and then came Princess Cape second last on the inside, and Master O'Reilly. 10 covered them, 800 left to go, and Maldivian by a length and a half. Thesio second. There's Zipping on an early move. He's gone up third, followed Zarita. Rahib under pressure. Next Samantha Miss. Sermione coming on out wide from Gallant Tess, Sailor Gear, Alamosa, then Master O'Reilly, and Princess Cape is back last. Less than 600 to go now. Maldivian headed by Thesio, Zipping on the outside. Rahib coming back in the middle, a line of 4. A length and a half Samantha Miss, who's running onto the outside, and then Zarita and Alamosa swinging for home. Again Maldivian finds the lead from Thesio, Rahib, Zipping, and Samantha Miss and Zarita behind them. Maldivian for home, led by 2 lengths. Down the outside is Zipping, Samantha Miss, and then came Zarita. It's Maldivian well clear. Samantha Miss running on strongly. Zipping coming back, but Maldivian wins it. Maldivian a length to Zipping. A half head Samantha Miss, I think third just in front of Zarita. They're followed in by Thesio, Sailor Gear, and then Gallant Tess, Princess Cape, Never a Hope, Master O'Reilly, Alamosa, Rahib, and Sermione.